All right, everyone. Welcome to another round of Another Round. Tonight we're going to be talking about Primal. And I would like to introduce you to our cast of characters. We have myself, Jeff Johnson. We have Stephen B. Jones and Scott Kolins. And tonight we are going to be talking about Primal. Steve, you want to give us a little history on Gendy and then how Primal came about?
I mean, first and foremost, if anyone's interested in Gendy Tartakovsky, I'd recommend just going to the very informational Wikipedia page.
Sure, people love that. People love Wikipedia.
But I don't know. How did I get stuck with a history lesson?
Well, let me back up a little bit, just in case this happens to be anyone's first show. I've done comics and animation for the last 30 some odd years. Steve has done comics and then animation for longer than that. Steve's credits include Batman Beyond, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Scooby-Doo, Transformers, and a million more things. And then Scott Kolins has not done any animation, but is a fan of storytelling. So that's kind of, we decided to talk about one of our favorite things and discuss the brilliance of Primal. And so we're going to do a conversation about the first episode, and then we've got a bunch of stills that we're going to show and talk about, and basically just do a deep dive on the first episode of Primal. And Steve, if you can give, we don't have to give a history of.
Well, I think it'd be fun, like what you just said, Jeff. Of that, I think, what was so fun about last week was to just kind of do a deep dive on our favorite, our first comics, the comics that kind of just got us into wanting to be professional storytellers. And I think all three of us started first and foremost of just wanting to draw comics, but of course we loved cartoons too, and I don't think Jeff and I ever set out to work in animation, but we both ended up working in animation, and I still do.
Right.
And
you're working on a show right now that you can't mention, top secret. And
I don't think I can, but Jeff's in the enviable position of pretty much being able to work in comics or animation, and then Scott is just such a big powerhouse of comics, but has always loved and still loves cartoons.
I will say a correction on that I've never worked in animation. I have technically worked in animation. I had some time to fill, and we had some connections back then when we were in the Bay Area, and I wound up working on the Spawn cartoon for a little bit. But it was just like background.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh, I forgot about that.
At Wild Brain?
Is
that what it was?
Yeah, Wild Brain. Yeah. That's a solid credit.
So we're all over the place.
Right.
But so I think, and something else I think we discovered that was fun about last week was, again, just getting into the specificity. And so we thought, well, look, we love comics and we love cartoons. Let's talk about a cartoon, but let's just talk about a specific cartoon and a specific episode of a cartoon.
Right.
So I think we're all fans of Gendy, but I think the place that we all feel like the greatest crossover of all of our loves of animation and comics and the things we're interested in seem to come together with Primal. His most recent thing that he and his team have put together. And he's just a remarkable guy. Like, he's around the same age as us, actually a little bit younger, which is extremely annoying. And I think he and his family, I think he was born in the Soviet Union back when it was the Soviet Union. He and his family, they defected and came to the US, and he ended up going to Cal Arts and just did amazing work there. And that led him to get into animation. I think he worked on a show called, maybe it was Two Stupid Dogs. And he may have even done some work on Batman the Animated Series, I think, too, before, like I think Jeff mentioned last week. I didn't work on Batman until 1997. So that would be Batman, the animated series, and New Adventures, not the original show that I worked on. So we certainly never worked there at the same time. And then I think he, went on to Dexter's Laboratory, and that's just an amazing show. That's kind of based off of a film that he did while he was at school.
Yep.
And then he was a part of Powerpuff Girls as well, and worked with a lot of his co-collaborators that he still works with very often to this day. Mm-hmm. And then I think I definitely followed Dexter's Lab a little bit in Powerpuff Girls, but I think probably we're all similar in that Samurai Jack is a thing that really got my attention.
Yeah, sure.
And then after Samurai Jack, I think they took a break from that to go work on the Clone Wars stuff that he did for George Lucas. And that stuff absolutely, definitely just blew my mind. I feel like we could do a whole episode just about the Mace Windu 2 minutes, where
ridiculous. Yeah.
Those are amazing.
Where Mace Windu, fights all those battle droids and stuff. And then he did that amazing show that I just love that I feel like never has gotten the attention or love it deserves, is that Symbionic Titan show, and available on iTunes. And then after that, he got into features doing the Hotel Transylvania films.
Yep.
And you can really, really see his distinct look and feel on that stuff. Then there was some talk about him maybe doing a Popeye animated thing that I don't think came together, but maybe still will. I'm not sure. Then they came back and they did like the final season of Samurai Jack to kind of wrap that story up. And that's really incredible looking. And then somewhere in the course of all this stuff, he also did an amazing Luke Cage comic book somewhere.
He did a comic?
Yeah, there's a miniseries.
I think I sent you an image of that, Jeff.
Oh, okay. I must have missed that one. All right. I'll have to find that.
Yeah, and then
I know I got to find that book too.
In the course of all this, I think the development for Primal kind of started up, and now he and a lot of the same people he's been working with for 20 years or more are making this cartoon Primal that all of us are very excited about.
Well, let's start with some of the first images from the opening scene of Primal. Right. Let's check this out.
There we go.
So it opens very simply. So there's no, I don't, if people haven't seen it yet, it's amazing, and it's some of his best work. And there's no dialogue. I mean, there's conversation and there's sound, and there's wonderful music and sound effects. And the whole thing is a journey into a whole other world. But it starts off very slow,
very quiet,
with basically this fishing scene, right?
Yep. Yeah, but even in that, that's one of the things I liked so much when I saw it the first time, and even when I was watching it again, is even just this like first minute of the show that's quiet, and then there's the really quick jab of the spear, and then we deal with the death of just even this first fish. This is very much like what the entire show is about, is just that whole survival kind of thing. But it's also the timing of this opening sequence is very indicative of the rest of the, well, maybe not the whole season of the cartoon, but a lot of it, in that there's quiet scene. You never know when something's going to jump out at you, or when the next thing is going to happen. Yeah, right. And then we go back to here, and he's just waiting for the next fish, when suddenly...
Yeah, well, just look at for a moment. Just look at that atmosphere. I mean, I know, Steve, we were going to definitely talk about the compositions and the storytelling and the rule of thirds and the way he leads the eye. But right
there is such a great example of that rule of thirds. School of composition, or not school, but a principle of composition. And Scott Wills, his apologies if I get his title wrong, art director, production designer, like just an amazing painter and stylist that he's been working with for years and years. And I feel like just in those first few images, the contrasts are so great, like the sort of pale green turquoisey of the water and then that bright red blood first coming in, and those colors are sort of mildly complementary, but it just pops.
Yeah, it certainly it's a shocking moment. And then
and I guess it's sort of a declaration right off the bat of you're in for something different, because God knows, for those of us that have worked in cartoon, depicting red blood, depicting blood at all, let alone red blood, is just essentially a giant cartoon no.
Right.
And just within seconds, it's like, oh yeah, there's going to be bright red 70s colored blood in this cartoon. So hold on to your hats and glasses.
Well, one of the things I love about the storytelling in this is not only is it the incredibly atmospheric and beautifully painted, but it picks shots that for me I never would have thought of at all. Like, it never would have occurred to me. This shot would have sort of, like, the idea of this shot might have occurred to me. Guy fishing, quiet, light streaming in. But the shot from up under the water here.
That's an awesome shot.
Well, wait, guys, I was thinking, is this an up under the water shot, or is it his reflection on the water, and it's showing how still he's being? I'm trying to remember.
Even better.
Could be either way.
Yeah. Either way, I would have not realized. That's a good question, Steve.
But that's actually one of the interesting aspects of the cartoon as well, is because so much of it isn't verbal, and they're doing all this pantomime storytelling or with music or different things. I was hearing a bunch of different reviews about this episode or the season, whatnot, and I was hearing all sorts of different opinions of why this was happening or how he felt this way and why he did this over there. And they were very different from what I got out of it. So although we can all enjoy it and think it's great or whatnot, it's interesting that people can really pull away with it with surprising different opinions on the whys and wherefores.
Yeah, totally. But there's one of the things that's really great is, like, there is such beautiful timing, right? Yeah. The highs and the lows in this are a roller coaster ride, because you have this moment. I just showed it to my wife, and she fell into it right away, and she was sucked into that quiet moment where he's fishing, and then out of nowhere, bam.
That happened. Right. And I just looked at that shot again. I think it is the reflection. But yeah, and that burst through shot, and then you only hold on it for a few frames before then we just smash.
I was about to say
to the titles,
Right. Then a fraction of a second. So this part, when the violence happens really fast.
Yeah, and then you get the title.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. So just right in there, the pure competence, the genius of the shots selected, and the way the pacing works it's a masterclass for anyone who's ever done a storyboard, trying to figure out, like, okay, I see how far the bar has been raised.
Well, I think, Gendy and them have talked publicly about what drew them to this was that in a lot of times, like, they ended up in Samurai Jack and some of their other shows, they'd done sort of non-verbal parts of the show, and that people had responded really well to them, and they thought, like, well, wouldn't that be fun and interesting to try? And kind of like what Jeff said about timing, it's like, like cartoons, as Chuck Jones would say, they're all about timing, and these guys are so good at building the anticipation and drawing and stretching out those moments before, like the action's very in your face, but it isn't like one of those things where you're just being assaulted with action the entire time, start to finish.
Well, one of the things, I don't know if people, some of the phrases, some of the words that we use in animation are pretty just obvious to us because we play with them every day. But it's always called, before something happens, it's called an antic. In anticipation of a thing about to happen. Nice. Right? So you have the antic, and then you have the action. So I always thought that was great, because that moment before the action is almost as tense and dramatic as the actual action, if not more so, depending.
Right. And then Jeff, I feel like we'd be remiss. It now occurs to me that there's a drink in your background. We haven't introduced your drink for the night.
Yeah. All right. So I am going to be drinking. Hang on 1 second. Let me do this.
Here it comes.
We are drinking.
Are we ready?
We are a drink and draw affiliated.
Here comes that gator out of the water.
Right. So I will be drinking my favorite drink, Steamworks Meadery. Tonight it's Phoenix Rising. So I live in a town next to a town named Phoenix, and it got burned pretty badly a couple years ago in that gigantic wildfire. And so the guy who runs Steamworks Meadery put out this special brand called Phoenix Rising, and much of the proceeds from this go to the reconstruction of that town. So that's what I'll be drinking.
Scott, you live next to Phoenix as well.
I do. There's a whole Phoenix connection. I'm just drinking a simple old Kirin.
All right.
Ichiban.
And Mr. Jones.
Coyote Durant says, man, so cool to see you guys again for the second straight week. Love it. Coyote, very good to see you too, at least virtually.
Thanks, Coyote.
There you go.
To continue. All right. Well, first is a little homage to Chevy Chase in Caddyshack. I already opened my drink earlier, and then I forgot I wanted to open it on air, so I thought I would pretend to open it.
Oh, what a good movie! We should someday do that one.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Many thanks to Jeff and my friend and coworker Andy Chang, who gave me this amazing bottle opener when we shared a studio at Warner Brothers. Some of it, I think, was he was just annoyed and tired of me asking him for a bottle opener almost every day to open my sodas. But I thought it takes a prop designer to get you a really cool, interesting looking, bottle opener, which I also feel would be a pretty good weapon. And keeping it real for the non-drink drinkers, I am drinking a Ballandine Cola. It's an Italian cola. It's a little bit red because they get these beans from Sierra Leone, and it is delicious.
Damn!
Wow!
Right, nice. That's very nice. All right,
it's good stuff.
Cool. Okay, hang on 1 second. Let me see what I'm doing. All right. Right. Cool. All right, guys. Let's now we got a beverage. Let me do this while I'm thinking about it.
We got a cartoon.
We got a cartoon. We got a beverage. There we go. Steamworks Mead. Not only is the mead good, like the guy who runs it, Peter, is very cool. And there you go. That's one of my favorites. Cool. Let's get back to Primal. All right, where were we?
He just a giant crocodile type creature just leapt out of the water to bite him. And then when we come back, there's this amazing slow-mo shot that's on screen right now.
Yeah.
Where they play, again, speaking of timing, they play with the timing in this too, where the pace of the slow-mo changes throughout the course of the shot, you know?
Right.
Yep.
Totally. Yeah, that's I would love to see the animatics. I would love to look behind the scenes and they're so brilliantly done. And I know that they've all worked together for a really long time, so they have a rapport. They know what to do. They're all super pros. Like there's just a level of experimentation and ballsiness to Primal that is impressive.
You guys have worked with a lot of directors and stuff. As a choice, because of the opening sequence we've had up to the show card, the Primal show card, why do you think he then did that sequence when he's diving away from the alligator prehistoric monster? Why was that one slow?
Oh, because I think that this moment right here, I think is so startling.
And so quick, right?
Right. And then this cuts to Primal. That gives you a moment to catch your breath. And then here, the slow motion, you come back in and he reminds you, okay, take it, like, here we go. And so you really get a chance to experience all those emotions before.
I think it's also about what Jeff just said too. It's about anticipation, is that the pacing of this show is that for one thing, our hero here, also known as Spear, right? Though obviously we only know that from reading about him, since no one speaks anything.
Right.
I think I mean, he's going to end up hiding from
Yep.
from this character. So I think I mean, I think it's just about building that moment where it's like, oh my God, like he could be totally screwed here. And that next shot, the one right before this one, Jeff, I just think it's such a great pan.
No,
Where
there's one in the water. I may have sent it later.
Exactly. Yeah. Where he dives in, he breaks the water, he swoops down out of frame, and then he comes back up into frame, and then camera pans over with him.
As he's swimming around the rock.
There's just so many beautiful examples of that in this episode, with just these like judicious use of pans where I mean, some of the stuff in the middle of the show too, when he's like running and there's that amazing kind of run cycle that's very reminiscent of like how Hank McCoy might run. Shout out to my
right. So this one, then it goes to the giant gator thing leaving or whatnot. That was my thinking of after seeing that sequence again and seeing the slow-mo of that the almost attack that almost gets him, and then he swims around, is because to do a slow-mo on that one gives you all the adrenaline kind of rush, but almost closure a little bit, gives you a little something to hang on to, because then we go through a quiet scenario again. Then we play a little cat and mouse and a little more fishing, and then he's taking the fish back to his home. And there's a bunch of that cat and mouse thing going on from there. So I thought that was one of the things of like, he wanted to give us something to, again, to show us what we were in, what was in store.
I think so too, Scott. Plus, I think it's revelatory about character, right? Which is that Spear is actually very intelligent, right? Like he picks
He's
his
a smart
battles.
hunter. Yep.
He picks his battles, and so he realizes there's no way he can beat this thing. So it's about just hiding and evading, and then he goes right back to work. Which is to go back to fishing and stuff. But like you said too, it does. So it's a little bit of them giving us a taste of action right at the beginning, because not wanting to start the show too slow, and in a way too, right? Like you said, they prolong the moment of action. But it's also showing like he's no dummy. He would absolutely die if he tried to fight this creature.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What's interesting later when he does wind up trying to fight things that are bigger than him, right? Like it's an interesting, like later on, like in this scenario, he's cautious, but later on, the caution goes right out the window.
Well, it becomes that emotional change.
Yeah.
Right. He has something to live for now. Him both for himself and the fact he has to provide for his family. Once he, we should say right now, everyone should watch Primal. If you haven't watched it, we're not going to talk about episodes 2 through 10, but there's going to be some spoilers for episode 1, guys.
Right.
Okay.
Because one sets it all up.
So spoiler alert.
So I just, Megan was watching it with me because I was rewatching it and not happy about things that happen in it. But in the end, she's like, oh, okay. I get now why they're friends and why they're together. But she's like, I don't like this at all.
But I think that's, if we're going to try to dance around it, I think is.
I mean, we will. Yeah.
That's why. I think that's why he suddenly has that sense of abandon. Where he suddenly is taking on the bigger creatures, like in that amazing like whip pan, where he's going by camera, and he's spinning around to build up momentum with the boulder that he slaps into the knee of the dinosaur.
Right. What's funny is like you guys both sent me a lot of reference, but like none of that stuff. It's all in the beginning.
I fully intended to, and then I got so right. I think both Scott and I were like, okay, we got to freeze frame stuff, and then literally it's like I'm racing to get my deadline done. It's like 45 minutes after freeze framing, I realized, I'm 4 minutes into the show. I'm wanting to freeze frame every shot.
Right.
That's why I sent you guys that note. I'm like, oh my God, we could just talk about these first 4 minutes. We could just keep going over that sequence over and over and over because it was so good. And obviously they did it. I mean, that's the other part that, sometimes people don't realize when making this stuff for either comics or animation is that, Gendy and all those guys that are working on it, they probably did that, first 4 minute sequence for again and again and again, working over that thing to get it to be so precise and so perfect and whatnot. There's a lot of work put into that opening sequence.
Well, speaking, Jeff said he'd love to see the animatic. I think there's a few things floating around on the net, and one of them shows a little bit of the animatic. I think maybe they did some promotional thing for New York Comic Con last year.
Right.
And I think the animatic is kind of how they ended up selling the show to the studio they ended up using, which is, I guess, this is pretty uncommon in American TV animation, is that they're using this French studio called Studio La Cachette, I think.
Yeah.
And apparently, Gendy and them just sent them the animatic, and then the guys over in the Paris studio were just like, yes, we would like to work on this. And boy, it certainly made, when Scott sent me one thing, I saw the program they were drawing in and I couldn't quite see it. I just saw like part of the frame, and I Googled those words, and then I like tried to look up the interface, and I guess it's this animation program called TV Paint. And I've heard really great stuff about it. And the brushes, and if you look at the line work of the show,
right. Well, let's go ahead and let's take so I know that Frazetta and Mignola and a lot of that more fantasy stuff were some of the motivations, but just when you talk about the brushes and the color, just take a look at that. It's very much like some of that fantastic work that Bakshi did in Fire and Ice, that Frazetta cartoon way back in the day, but just the lushness of these backgrounds and these environments is stunning.
Yeah, and I noticed most of their composition and those landscapes as he's heading home with the fish or whatnot, they're all very beautifully laid out, and the colors themselves can be easily thought of as beautiful, but I also thought of them as being, they're also a warning of the whole situation. None of them were like happy sunshine day kind of beautiful. Right. They were also beautiful, but a little bit haunting or a little foreboding. They're always like mountains on the edge, or look at those trees right there, or the foliage that's around there. It's all a little bit off. It's a pretty place and whatnot, but
that's dangerous. Like,
you couldn't relax.
No, well,
absolutely.
The BG designs are, Jeff actually got into the animation. Your first job in animation was BG design, right, Jeff?
Yeah, my first gig, if I had been this good at BGs, who knows if I had been. So my first gig doing backgrounds was on Justice League Unlimited, and I did a bunch of backgrounds for that show. And then when I moved over,
replacing the Abel and your co-conspirator from
right. Our guest from last week.
Yeah, the Reverend Dave Johnson.
I was very, very lucky that Dave Johnson was doing backgrounds for Unlimited, and he was moving on to do something else. And then I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I took a test, got the gig. So I still had to take a test because I had done lots of backgrounds in my comic book work, but I'd never done animation before. So I took a test for the episode that involves ancient Egypt, Hawkman, Hawkgirl.
Nice.
And luckily that was kind of in my wheelhouse anyway. So they liked those backgrounds, and then I got the full-time gig, and then I was just in animation for the next 15 years. It was a good transition.
Jeff and I, the Reverend Dave and I worked on Justice League Unlimited together. And then when Dave moved on to Cartoon Network and Jeff, we swapped out one Johnson for another Johnson.
We're mostly interchangeable.
He took Dave's desk too. So I went from sitting next to Dave to then sitting next to Jeff. And I always appreciated that I got that Jeff's first animation job was sitting next to me. We were in different cubicles, but we could peek over the edge of the cubicle.
Yeah, it was good times. And they didn't even really need to change the name tag.
Well, I think just a black Sharpie was put over to Dave.
They didn't even change it. It was just, I just stayed at Dave's desk.
But look at that background. Look at that thing you just put back up. It is unquestionably beautiful.
Right.
And yet at the same time, it's not a happy place. It's not an easygoing place.
Now, I think their background designer is this amazing, I think he's German, Christian Schellewald. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing his name, but I think he worked with Scott Wills, their amazing art director, at DreamWorks Feature. And then an interesting thing about, which you can hear these guys talk about in more detail, is that, they're using line work in the backgrounds, which is not always the case in television animation. And I guess they just fell so in love with Christian's line work, they didn't want to get rid of it. So they just did all of Scott's painting behind Christian's lines. And I think the style they came up with is really interesting and unique and not something we've seen very often. And it's definitely evocative of some of the color palettes and stuff they've used before, but obviously too, it feels very inspired by Frazetta for sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, definitely leaving the line work in and painting behind the lines gives it a look like no other cartoon. I mean, it doesn't, the shapes are completely unique, and just the process is totally different.
Yeah.
And rule of thirds again, I mean, that the spear is right along that, the west line of the,
right. And that horizon line is exactly in that line, and all those mountains fall right in that middle row.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's technically perfect. I mean, one of the things that I love about how good these guys are is that they can use the math to their advantage and just make incredible freestyle art, while always being technically correct.
Mm-hmm.
And they're mixing in all sorts of great shapes here. I mean, look at those mountains in the background. They look a little bit alien, they look really cool and everything, but they don't look like normal mountains.
Right.
They all
cool.
kind of look like the jaw of an even bigger dinosaur.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's really interesting, Jeff. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So who even knows what world this is? And then, so the backgrounds are amazing, but then just look at that impression they get with such a little line.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it works so beautifully. It's so simple, and works so well, especially with all the little bits of information that we're getting scraps out of this thing since someone isn't talking the whole time. When you get that sort of information on somebody's face, that speaks, volumes about the situation that he's in and all the stuff we're going to learn about him.
Yeah.
Well, a great thing about animation is it travels really well, right? Because it's very easy to just redub voices. And so any cartoon you make, it's pretty easy to sell it around the world, because you don't have to worry about lip sync the same way you do if you're trying to dub Italian actors speaking for, Ocean's 11 or whatever. But I think, it's super, now they don't even have to pay voice actors. You know what I mean? Like this show can just be international without any redubbing.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because you don't need to be able to speak any language to be able to read it and see it and understand it.
Right.
In fact, I think that was also a bonus for that French animation team that you were talking about, Steve, is that they found out it was going to be that way, and they even liked the job even better because they weren't going to have to worry about dancing around, fixes of dialogue or any of that kind of stuff.
Right. And interesting seeing them talk about the fact that they really wanted to be able to work with a director like Genndy who could actually draw the notes that they had. That they're a very frustrating thing sometimes in animation can be that you might get a lot of notes from people farther up the line that don't have the ability to express themselves with pictures. And so trying to use verbal language or written language can be sometimes very difficult when you're trying to convey certain things. And there's nothing better than being able to have a boss that just draws better than you. And then so there we go. No, I want this. You're like, oh,
right. When I was working on the Boondocks, they were trying to get as many people to do storyboards as possible. And it was a very anime heavy show, and I was doing characters on that show, and every once in a while you would get back a confusing section of board that didn't make any sense. And one of the ones is that at one point Huey grabs another character for no reason by the leg and starts dragging him across the room while he's giving his line, and we're like, what is this? Why is this? And it's because not only did so there's no coins of phrase, there's no idiom transfer, right? So it was all very literal. In the script, they had written that Huey was pulling the other character's leg, and we know that he's joking. He's joking around. but the Korean studio, the storyboard artist over there, just drew him pulling the leg.
That's so great. I thought, Jeff, you were going to tell another story, which I hope you won't mind. But just speaking of when you work for someone who draws better than you, and Jeff at Boondocks was working for this one of the most phenomenal artists that probably Jeff and I have ever met, and who's also one of the nicest guys, Sung Kim. And I think there was one point, Jeff, where you'd done a drawing, and Sung's note was essentially, just draw it better.
Yeah, no, that was the note. Draw better. was the note.
It's like, Sung, we're not all superhuman Asgardian level artists. Like, we're trying.
Exactly. No, so I hear you. I'm doing my best, but like it was just, and it wasn't like, hey, draw better. It was, the letters were mean. It was draw better.
We'll have to put up a link to Sung's stuff after the show or something like that.
Absolutely. Sung's a genius. That's no doubt about it. All right. So here we have another, this scene happens like a little bit later. But I still just love the white in the background. Now it's almost as though, so the color, not only are the drawings doing a lot of the storytelling, that the color palette is doing a ton of the storytelling too. So there's like there's that white. It's almost as though there is a pause and a changing of the field, a changing of the, like, here now we're cutting to white. This is a palette cleanse.
Right.
Happening before.
It's almost black and white, the background.
Yeah.
And then and all the colors kind of drained out of the figure too.
Right.
It becomes very stark for the sudden shock of it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think before, I don't actually have any reference for when he fights the red dinosaurs, but I thought it was interesting, the contrast of
it's amazing. Like when he finally goes into that homicidal rage,
right,
and the backgrounds all go red and he's heavily tinted with red. Plus that's an incredible shot because it starts in a ridiculous close-up, and then he steps back away, like once he realizes what's happened. I mean, there's this very Mignola shot after something bad happens, and we're seeing practically just a silhouette of the horned dinosaur. And then the horned dinosaur and the background's all red, and then the horned dinosaur closes his mouth, and we just get the silhouette of red blood dripping out of his mouth. And I thought that really reminded me of Hellboy or something, Absolutely. And then when we cut the super tight on Spear's eyes, and then of just shock, and then he goes into anger, and then he screams, and the camera starts to pull back, or he moves back from cam. I don't think it's a camera move. I think he animates back. And then then we get this kind of shot that has some Kirby in it kind of too. And then just an amazing example of that John Buscema, talking about an antic, they hold a little bit on the pose as he's cocking back the spear, and then he throws it past Cam. And then we pull out a little bit as he's still in that again, and like it's right out of the John Buscema How to Draw Comics the Marvel way, as he's thrown the full thing. And then we do a thing. Jeff, I'm sure you and I have done this shot, a similar shot to this many times in storyboards, which is that this kind of a bipack shot where the spear is in the foreground, and we're zooming in on the background. But they have all these great anime lines, but they do something that I've never seen really in a shot before, which is that the spear in the foreground is rotating and changing too.
I was about to say, it was almost a shake cam on the spear.
Exactly. Like almost always that would just be a held element while you zoomed in on the other thing. But the fact that it just created so much more like light and chaos to that shot,
Totally. I will see if I can't find a picture of that as we move on. So basically I don't have pictures of it because we didn't actually want to. I mean, the urge was just to show the episode and talk over it. That's really experience it, but that's not cool. So, but anyone who hasn't seen Primal yet, 100%, you have to watch this cartoon. It's ridiculous.
Wait, all right,
Absolutely.
Scott, I recognize the Vindicator and Captain Cold, but is that Juggernaut without his helmet back there? What is that to your? No, that not that way. Look the other way.
Oh.
Oh,
Look, the troll.
Ulik.
I cannot believe that there is a sculptor of Ulik the rock troll. That's incredible.
And he's on his hammer base or whatever kind of thing too.
It's made out of uru. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't know about Uru, but because he's got a hammer too that he smacks around with Thor.
Sure. Was it made by Eitri the dwarf as well?
Okay, so now you're showing off. You're just showing off. I actually have I have the page where Mephisto crushes his brother.
Oh,
Jumps him in the Thor annual, yeah.
Scott, I like your cup there in the background. People should know that Scott was educated at the Joe Kubert School of
I just go to the wrong side.
Yeah.
Comic art.
Ta-da, ta-da.
There you go. Lots of coffee. Lots and lots of coffee. All right. Do we have some? Oh, what are the odds of us doing some Primal drawings? That's a good question. Probably not tonight. Tonight on this show, we maybe on another Drink and Draw episode or a different show. But we're mostly just going to talk about how much we love it tonight, as opposed to trying to draw.
We'll be drawing soon, but not yet.
I think as we get the hang of it, right now, we only know how to rub our stomach. We don't know how to pat our head and rub our stomach at the same time, I think.
But if anybody wants to see a really cool dinosaur drawing.
Yeah.
Oh. Ooh, that's amazing.
Who did that?
What do you mean? Who did that?
Who did that? Who could have done that?
If you go to Scott's Instagram, I bet there's an amazing amount of dinosaur and monster drawings on there that are reminiscent of Primal already. That looks like Michael Golden to me.
That's really Michael Golden.
Yeah, it's one of his Jurassic Park covers.
I know, that's crazy. Man, that guy does a good dinosaur.
Oh, look at that thing.
Well, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and show.
Please do, Jeff.
One of the final images, one of the tested. So this is the final image of the show. I'm going to skip ahead and show this.
Yeah.
Where that's a wave crashing behind them on the beach, and he climbs on. They become friends, and he climbs on the back for the first time, and they're a team. But one of the things I love most about that drawing is just the expression in the dinosaur. Fang has such an emotive face. They do so much with those shapes. It's crazy.
Yeah. And the jaws are constantly moving just a little bit as it's howling.
Yeah, and the sound design that they ended up coming up with for, like their sound designer, just the language of the dinosaur, let alone, I think it's a guy named Joel Valentine that's been working again with Genndy for decades at this point. And I think in one of the documentaries they talk about that they discovered that there was some chicken sounds or bird sounds that they kind of snuck into Fang's repertoire.
Yeah, they definitely the sound design is as much a work of art as every other piece of that, which is one of the things I think is interesting about cartoons. Like Steve and I have been part of some really great cartoons and on some pretty amazing teams. And I think the difference between working on a cartoon and drawing a comic is that you're only as good as you can be when you're doing a comic. Like you're not going to be a better penciler. You're not going to be you're going to be as good as you are. And so much of the weight is just on whatever that skill level is. But when you're doing a cartoon, you have people who are amazing at everything that they do. Like you have the guy who's a fantastic color guy. You have a guy who does incredible props and characters and sound and music and camera movement and timing and all this. Every one of those people involved is an expert. And so you get this incredible orchestra of talent. And I think that it's really impressive. I did a scene on I think it's Batman Bad Blood, where it takes place on a wharf and there's machine gun fight and And I thought I did a pretty good job in the storyboards, but when I finally saw it in the cartoon, I was really impressed with myself because all these other people had made it look so amazing that I'm like, oh yeah, I drew that. And it's just not how it works in a cartoon. There's so many experts involved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right. Both comics and animation are built on a little bit of a, capitalistic assembly line process, right? Like an amazing, incredible thing about comics is that one person can write and draw and, ink and letter and color. It doesn't happen very often. There's not too many people, but you think about like Frank Miller do, Sin City or something like that. Like every so often we have someone that can just kind of do it all. But in a best case scenario in a comic, you got a great writer who gives it to a penciler who pluses it, and then you maybe the penciler has an inker that pluses it, colorist, like there are a few people, but it's such a bigger team in animation. And I know, right? I mean, it's Gendy brings in new people, but he also keeps working. He has a core team that he seems to kind of go back to again and again. And he talks a lot about, having each person along the line plus it and take it to that next level. And I think somewhere in one of his interviews, he talks about like that he likes to, he wants to be a fan of his coworkers. And that's a fun, inspiring place to be if you're sitting next to people that, are the best at what they do,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to throw on another. So I'm going to go back a bit and then take a look at some of these other images that Steve sent. This one, again, we saw this one for sure.
Yeah.
And
I think, I went on a bit of a rule of thirds frenzy here for a minute, just because
right.
It was like every shot just seemed to represent that.
It's hard. If you start really looking at them, it's hard to move on. And then there's this one, which I also love. Once again, the same, like one thing I love about this is like the main character is over there on that left-hand line in that part of the scene, but also so much more of what's important in the story is revealed on the other lines. Like it seems like negative space, but it's actually filled of what's coming next.
Yep.
Yeah, and then this is one of my favorite ones, as he's just
gorgeous shot.
Right.
Yep, those verticals, the painting on the painting technique on the grass is so great.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's also very Frazetta-like, where it like spotlights little pieces of information, the foliage over here, or the leaf over there, or the bark a little bit. But then there's all sorts of areas in there where there's like it's just a haze. You get a little bit of color and a little bit of ambiance, but it's not like you see every blade of grass everywhere or any of that stuff.
Well, the colors are so beautiful, but it works tonally too. Like we should have turned some of these into black and white images, and then you'd see like, okay, it's big, heavy, dark on screen left,
like this one, do that, right? Like completely leads the eye. Hey, who was Steve? His name escapes me at the moment, but he was the background painter for Bugs Bunny.
Oh, Maurice Noble, the art director.
Yes.
Please go buy this, America, and parts around the world.
There you go. Hold that up.
Maurice
Lovely.
Noble.
There you go. The Noble Approach. Yeah, that's an amazing book.
Well, the collection of guys that Gendy and his team are, it's such an interesting, unique combination of factors, right? Because there's like all the silent filmmaking stuff. It's very Akira Kurosawa, David Lean, like some of the best people that ever made movies, and that play really well internationally because they're not really about language. They're about visual storytelling, And then there's also, but there is clearly like a lot of love and reverence for Japanese artists and anime too, like in the fight scenes, in the storytelling, sometimes in the design. And then there's a really strong influence of just like both like graphically, like what you're saying with Maurice Noble, and in the character design, like when you think about Dexter's Lab or Powerpuff Girls, and it sort of still drifted into all the stuff that's become more adult. all that late 50s, early 60s kind of very flat graphic modern art influence on animation design. So they've got just a mixture of kind of the best filmmakers, the best, the coolest style of animation that most of us probably really love and respond to, and some of the best Japanese stuff too.
Absolutely. There's a comment earlier that I saw I have to agree with, that William Stout ain't bad either, and that's 100%.
It's an understatement.
Yeah, William Stout, one of the best dinosaur artists of all time. Incredible atmospherics, fantastic dinosaurs. He is not just a fantastic artist; he is a student of all that stuff.
And a super nice guy. Remember, we met him at that one con.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to see the work in print, but to see it in person is a whole other animal.
Oh yeah, that's right. He had all those originals on the table.
Yeah. Steve, I have a quick question. We'll throw this in there. Like, Matt, what animation would you love to revisit, continue, if had an opportunity to work on, or to do both, to work on or to watch?
What animation series would you love to revisit / continue if it had an opportunity? Yeah, what does Matt? Let's see. What would I like to work on again, or
just do both? Answer both.
Well, I've been really lucky and worked on some tremendous. One of my favorite shows ever to work on, just in terms of like the content, the crew, the studio at that time, was Batman Brave and the Bold. I was lucky enough to work on season 2 of Batman Brave and the Bold, and it's definitely one of the most fun times I've ever had in the industry. Our showrunner was this incredibly talented guy named James Tucker, who you should follow on Instagram and Google for his amazing resume, and just a bunch of really great guys that Jeff knows that we worked with. And it was just so absurd and so fun, and getting to, draw Enemy Ace and Vixen and Huntress and some of the just wackiest parts of the DC universe. That was a tremendously fun show. I would love to work on that again. I'd love to storyboard on it. I was a character designer on it, but it would be really fun to actually draw people punching each other.
I did some boards on Brave and the Bold. I got one of my favorite, even though it was one of my first sequences I ever boarded, it's still one of my all-time favorite sequences, was the question on Apocalypse fighting parademons. I couldn't. When they handed me that assignment, I'm like, "Are you kidding me with this right now? This is a dream come true." Such a fun. Yeah, that was good times.
Super
I just
cool.
want to, point out. Real fast
what about you, Jeff? Assuming that Matt is saying, what show would you go back and work on again? What would you go back and work on again?
I would definitely. I would join you on Brave and the Bold for sure. That was a really, really fun show. But if I could go back and do anything, I think that my time on Transformers Prime was probably the most fun, and I was very proud of that show. And we had an incredible crew, and the colors were brilliant. I think that was one of the best shows I ever got to work on. Just all around top notch.
Such a great team, because you had Jeff Klein doing the writing stuff, and that was really great. You had a really, really great line producer, Therese, running it, and such great directors like Shant Negagosian and Vinton were directing on there, and just great people on the whole crew. So talented. Vince Toyama doing backgrounds, right?
Oh yeah, the backgrounds were crazy. I mean, they also built everything in SketchUp, so you knew. I mean, you just got to live in that world, and as a storyboard artist, that was super helpful.
I got to work on Transformers Robots in Disguise, and Vince was still in charge of that. And boy, oh boy, does it spoil you as a storyboard artist to be able to just like, oh, there's already a CG background, and I can just go in and maneuver it, and just figure out where I want to put the camera.
Well, like none of the things, I don't know if this is true or not, but I don't get the feeling that these guys are building any kind of CG models. I think they're just going old school 2D, right?
Looks like it to me.
Yeah.
I wonder, because they know how to play with that. Like in Star Wars Clone Wars, they definitely built all the ships, I think. And
oh yeah, interesting.
and there's definitely been some CG stuff, but I mean, the desire may have just been to be organic. And I still, sad it won't be long after this episode, but I still haven't watched all of Primal yet, so I think I'll have to try to keep an eye out. But I don't think there's any CG elements.
I don't think so. I mean, maybe in some of the compositing where you're moving, there's really great sections where the characters, like herds of dinosaurs, run past you. So maybe
the line quality and the brushes looks, I mean, it is such a good advertisement for TV Paint. I almost just bought the program today because I'm like, man, if I could draw with lines, imagine being able to storyboard. I wonder if you can't storyboard in TV Paint. I guess you probably can't. If you can animate in it, you could probably storyboard in it.
Probably.
Look at that.
So good. That soft silo.
Yeah, look at him in there between the tree, like coming through the trees, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then also one of the things I always try and do when I'm composing stuff, and I get a little bit anal about this, is I always go for odd numbers as opposed to even numbers when I'm laying stuff out. I just
right.
That I think that seems more balanced to me.
There's almost a rule to that too. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're saying we're seeing 7 trees, Jeff?
Yeah, 7 trees, right? And then he hit one of him in the. I just always find, once again, it's technical, but I do find that there's an artistry in it. These guys are.
That's why Jeff loves Transformers Prime. It's Transformers Prime numbers.
Yeah, it was 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. It's 11, 13, 17. I'm going to stop there.
I was going to say, tune in next week while we
continue to count prime numbers,
and we count as many places as we can in an hour in terms of the value of pi.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, the things that an artist. Yeah, here's another one. Look at this. This is one of my favorites. This is such a classic shot.
Just beautiful.
Very Frazetta inspired, like some of the Conan painting stuff, but it also reminds me a little bit of some of those like Lord of the Rings.
That's what I was going to say. Yep.
Scott, I read your mind.
You did.
Right.
Oh, wait, sorry.
So gorgeous.
And we should also say in here that they're doing the research for the stuff that Gendy said at the beginning of this project, when he had started putting it together, it was more just like a little pet project on the side where he was just trying to come up with something that made him happy. He made a comic book of it first.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And then did all that stuff later. So I think that's one of the reasons where I haven't seen all of Gendy's various shows and cartoons, but I've seen a fair amount at this point. And they do stick out as compared to other shows that I've seen. And I'm not that well versed in animation, but when I see it with my sons or different thing, they're like, oh, you've got to see this one, especially the Star Wars stuff. They were just screaming at me saying, you have to see that. They made me sit down. I'm like, working. I'm like, no, you have to come over and sit down and watch this right now. You have to. And yeah, when I watch it, I'm like, holy cow, look at this thing. And there's something about the aesthetic where, yes, he's doing all these brilliant animation things about it. But to me, coming from more this background of comic books, he's obviously got some synergy, energy, whatever that he loves of comic books seems to be solid through him, because it pulled me right in as a comic book guy going like, oh yeah, I can see that. Oh my God, this is so inspiring. I want to do this as a comic book or something else too.
I'm so glad you brought that up though, Scott, because it reminds me, like with the Star Wars stuff too, and it goes back to his influences, I think. And this is so true of Primal, but I remember it's the thing that really grabbed me about Star Wars Clone Wars. And I think it ties into one of his big influences being Akira Kurosawa, which is one of George Lucas's biggest influences. But Clone Wars had so much scale. Like, I think that Gendy's Clone Wars cartoon had more scale than any of the prequels did, and they do that in this shot too. But I remember that there's some shots where like Anakin goes to fight the lady with 2 red, lightsabers or something. And there's they would pull back on these shots where you're just like, oh my God, it just seems like, and you realize like, oh wait, that's what it felt like was missing in the prequels that the first 3 films had so much. Well, at some point we'll have to talk about a couple of, some anime studios have done that series on Disney Plus right now called Star Wars Visions. and one of the studios, Studio Trigger, which is this amazing studio that derived from Gainax that did all this amazing stuff. But I just only watched like half of one of theirs, but they nailed the scale. Just some of the, kind of like the George Lucas style, like there's just a bridge to nowhere in a giant thing, like in Empire, when Luke and Darth are up. It just seems like the Bespin Cloud City goes on forever,
Right.
And
you're right. That is a hallmark of Star Wars, because even the opening sequence of the first movie, there's just the giant ship that comes in for the longest amount of time. I remember being in the theater the first time when that came out, and we're like, is this ever going to end? How big is this ship? Oh my God.
Louise. Yeah, totally.
And just this episode of Primal bringing it back, it's like there's one great shot, I think, where it's like where Spear just starts. He's a tiny little shape climbing up the side of a mountain in silhouette.
Oh, wait. Hang on a second. I have that right here. Oh, wait. No, that's
swimming.
Water. Oh, yeah.
That's a great shot, though.
Yeah. No, where is that one? I don't have that one.
But I think that's.
You mean that middle sequence in his darkest hour?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Such a beautiful sequence.
Oh, someone else is bringing up Fire and Ice. Of course, we already brought up Frazetta, but of course we do have to reference the amazing Ralph Bakshi Frazetta love fest that is Fire and Ice.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah, because I do think that there is a sense of the not the same color palette, but a reminiscent color palette of these lush colors and these deep, moody scenes. Yeah, see, we got this guy.
Our friend Dan Panocean has an amazing Fire and Ice poster.
He does. He's got the Frazetta painting. All right, guys, I think so. What's funny about it is I was worried that we didn't have more reference of the rest of the episode, but we really did kind of only cover the first 5 minutes.
Tune in next week when we go through the next 5 minutes.
The next 5 minutes, yeah. So,
JK audience.
Yeah. But that's one of the things I think that is so impressive about
it's so good.
These cartoons and this art form and art in general is that there is an endless amount of conversation and appreciation you can have for it. I mean, even something as simple as like, look where that sun is through the red clouds. That is exactly in the right place with all these trees. And notice 3 trees, by the way. I mean, there's some
That piece looks different. Is that like an early advertising piece or something?
Yeah, I think that's a promo piece. That's not the final scene. That's not anywhere in the first episode.
No, because the trees look like they're built differently. They almost look like they're CG trees back there.
Yeah, this is a different piece.
And the T-Rex is all different. Yeah. That must have been in development or something.
Possibly, yeah.
It is a beautiful shot, though.
Yeah, one of the moon paintings.
One of their interviews, I appreciated hearing them talk that these are some of the best guys in the industry. They still don't get any development time either. Like, I feel like
that was great to hear.
Every cartoon that Jeff and I have ever worked on, the development is just episode 1. And so just to hear that, like, wait, even these guys don't get any development time? Like, okay.
Right.
Well, did you hear that other part, Jones, of that interview where they said that Gendy was all excited about getting that French animation group to do the first episode, but they thought for sure either A, that the animation company wouldn't continue on. They wouldn't want to necessarily do it episode after episode. And they didn't think that the company was going to be into it either. I think they're a little bit expensive or something. Yeah. They're like, probably just be. But when they got the first episode done, they're like, we have to keep doing it like this. This is so good.
Well, yeah, right. France has a pretty good labor protection of labor, and most animation is sent overseas to countries that do not have the kind of labor unions that the United States or Europe has. So I think they probably are not the cheapest studio in town if they're in France, in Paris.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's pricing.
But then Gendy also talked about working with that animation company was really cool. And I don't know if it was just the program you were mentioning or just that work ethic or how they're working it. But he also said it was great because it wasn't like the regular TV animation where I think you'd send off a whole episode and then eventually you get that whole episode back on animation, and then you try and do as many notes as you can within the time frame.
Right.
He said that the French company would send back what they'd finished, whatever, every week. And then he'd get to make notes on just what they'd finished that week and then send it back. And he said it was like feature animation kind of control over the whole project, or that kind of enthusiasm of being able to really pick through everything and do the best possible job and not wait until the end kind of to do notes.
No, it sounds like a pretty unique, pretty unique situation. And if we're getting 5 episodes a year, then it's a much smaller turnaround in order, and yeah, it'd be fascinating to know what their budget is. But
it would be.
But probably not necessarily interesting for everyone, but interesting. For
no,
me.
I mean, yeah. Also, you don't want to tell how expensive animation is. That kind of frightens people. It's pretty expensive. Anyway, I think I think we could probably end it there. We've been talking for about an hour.
The only other thing I want to say about this show and watch this thing, besides it making me all a fan of Primal, and I haven't watched it in months now. I had watched all the episodes, but I need to watch them all again and again. It was really inspiring to hear all the stuff that Gendy talked about the show and making the show and watching the very show and how it was put together. It just inspires me to do a better job on all of my projects. And like I've talked to you guys on the side about that, all my plans of the things that I want to do in the next year or two, whatever they are, it just fuels me for all that stuff.
Absolutely.
That has been a very fun and unexpected aspect of, when Jeff said like, hey, you want to just come and talk about, comics and cartoons? I'm like, well, because if everyone knows that me and Jeff and Scott used to share an animation studio together in the 90s where we would just sit and draw and just bullshit exactly like we're bullshitting now. So I was like, all right, I'm in, because I miss just sitting and bullshitting with you guys. But last week, if it was just talking about our favorite comics and what got us started in the first place, and then just looking at something that's so artistically beautiful today, like I've definitely found like, oh, wait, I'm finding myself to be rather fired up here by all this stuff that we're looking at.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it's kind of like when we used to go to shows, you would go to a show and you would see all this artwork being done. And
Exactly.
You could not wait to get home and be like, oh, okay. I'm going to try this. I'm going to figure this out. Like, this guy is kicking my ass. I need to get on the stick.
You remember how that used to be at San Diego? We'd all go down or whatever and be like, this and that and this and that. We're trying to break in or whatever we were doing at the time. And by the end, you're exhausted. But also, we'd seen so many good friends and such great artwork and heard about great things going on. We were just like, I got to go to the studio Monday. Oh my God, I got to work on something. This is
get some work done. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was definitely a fire.
Well, Scott, let's both finish. I'm going to finish Primal. You guys rewatch, and then definitely watch those Clone Wars, and then you got to watch Symbionic Titan. Just go in reverse order. I think you'll have a really great time with all this Gendy stuff.
Sure,
I will check it out. Absolutely.
Thank you, Gendy, and your entire amazing team for making awesome cartoons that we will keep watching.
Please keep going, man. Keep going.
I cannot wait for more Primal, for anything really. All right, guys. Well, I think that was great. I think we covered if we do an hour for 5 minutes of something every time, I think that we will never run out of things to talk about.
America and the world. Next week, we will discuss one panel from Avengers, from X-Men 133.
Excellent. All right, everybody. So join us next week. So we'll have something next week. We don't know what it's going to be yet, but we will announce that pretty soon. But it'll be pretty much more of this. All right, everyone. Thank you for coming out. And good night, guys. I'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Adios.
All right. So here we have, just in case it's not obvious, you can find us at all of our various online places. Here they are listed, and they are in the description box on the YouTube channel. So visit us, reach out, let us know what you think of the show. And if you have any questions or even topics, like what would you like us to talk for an hour about for 5 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed dilly-dallying with us, and maybe if you're lucky, you even lollygagged a bit. I don't know.
We can discuss that for an hour. All right, everybody. Thank you very much for coming by.